It's time for our final trip to Scranton, Pennsylvania. It's Boob Tube Boys Office Week. I'm Spencer. I've got Brian and Van with me. I'm doing part 3 of our 3-episode foray into the Office history, and we went in chronological order here. Brian, you did season 2, Casino Royale.
Yeah. Daniel Craig got just his nuts destroyed
by Mads Mikkelsen.
Yeah.
And then Van did some Virginia Woolf thing from season 4. What was that one called?
I don't remember.
Hunger Games.
Dinner Games.
Dinner Games.
It could have been called that.
Yeah, it really could have.
I've got season 7, episode 25, Dwight K. Schrute, in parentheses, acting, and then not parentheses, manager. This one aired on May 12th, 2011. It was episode 150 of The Office, and obviously well into the everybody, well, maybe not everybody, but very mainstream, very popular. People are tuning in for every new episode of The Office at this point. It's reached a whole new level of fame. And like we talked about just recently, within the last couple episodes, no more Michael Scott, guys. He's gone.
He's gone, and so is Will Ferrell, who briefly was in the show.
Who I guess I didn't see any of his episodes.
You didn't miss much. It was fine. There was a funny moment with him saying he was allergic to peanut butter, and Michael was feuding with him. So Michael made peanut butter sandwiches and was throwing them around the office, and D'Angelo was Will Ferrell's character's name. And he was ducking away. He was like, I'm allergic to peanut butter. And he was freaking out. And they're like, well, what happens? And he goes, I don't know. I just get a little stuffy. And then that's when everyone kind of started to turn on him because he was acting a little too weird. And the best gag about his character is that Jo, played by Kathy Bates, who's the owner of now Dunder Mifflin, she made him the manager because one day she was walking her dogs on the road and something happened and Will Ferrell's character saved her dog. So he had no qualifications, just that he was a nice guy who saved her dog.
The big celebrity casting that happens after The Office has that sort of clout. Almost never works for me.
Right.
So you guys actually covered a good chunk of kind of the transition here and the new characters. We also have not had Erin, although she's not new at this point. We haven't had her in our previous 2 episodes.
Right. She's been around for a season or 2.
Ellie Kemper, of course, who's now done quite a few things. And then I don't know who Gabe is in this episode.
I love
what's
Gabe.
that actor's name again?
Zach Woods, I think.
Sure.
And he is some guy who is in love with Erin. This is all I can tell from.
He came along once Sabre, the parent company that Kathy Bates owned, bought
Which they
Dunder
tried to call
Mifflin.
Sabre before they knew what it was.
Dunder Mifflin and Sabre when they're doing that.
They write the song.
But Gabe was like one of the guys for corporate Sabre.
Oh, I see.
He's here to kind of keep track. And I genuinely don't like Gabe, but love the character.
Yeah, it's a really well-performed character.
The guy's good at it.
Yeah, he's so good.
And he's a creep.
His character is also a big, get-ahead guy, like a big bootlicker
Makes
type.
sense. I think that's all of the new ones that we have in this one that we haven't already met, right? Jo, Gabe, and then they mentioned
Jordan.
D'Angelo. Oh, I don't know who Jordan is.
Well,
Another.
You don't need to.
Another
She's
secretary
barely in
type.
the show.
Well, I'll lay into this one. She was brought on because by this point in the series, Jenna Fisher has had a couple of kids. Not Pam. Pam has had a couple of kids, but Jenna Fisher's had a couple of kids, and she's no longer the hot girl. So NBC wanted to bring along a hot girl. So they got this, 20-year-old model to play Jordan, and nothing against the actress, but it's a worthless character that does not need to be there, and they even call out.
I was going to say there's a joke in this episode about that Dwight delivered.
And she's only in 4 episodes. She did not need to be there. It was a bad decision.
That's a hallmark of these late seasons, is they add a lot of characters trying to see what'll stick, and none of it really does. And some of the people they hire, too, are people from the comedy world, people with backgrounds, and what is on the page for them does not work. I don't know if it's you have this established cast of 15 or 18 people, and what do you need to really maybe just redirect focus on what you have?
It did, when I stopped watching, it already was starting to feel like a whirlwind with all these new cameos and all these big names, and the show was definitely changing its feel, and I got that sense that now it's what star is going to appear and have a part in this show now?
And that really takes away from, when we were talking about this in the overview, Van, you mentioned the kind of, this is a show where the intent was, this is an office you could work at with real people who look normal. And when all of a sudden you're seeing the biggest movie stars in the world showing up in the show, there is a disconnect there.
And hot models and everything. Did you ever see any of the episodes with Robert California, Spencer, played by,
no.
What's his name?
James Spader.
James Spader, who's great.
He is especially in his first time showing up, he just is so good. And he has moments too, but that's another one where I feel like he was written really weird when he stuck around. They didn't plan on that, by the way.
No, and I didn't mind him in the two-parter that we almost covered.
He's
where
really
he
good
applies.
at that.
That's fun. When he becomes the boss, I hate it. I think it's one of the worst characters in the show, only surpassed by Nellie. I can't remember that comedian's name. She was an English comedian. Very popular.
By all accounts, quite accomplished there, and then she got a role that I think everyone felt bad about.
And hated the character.
Because the character is just shitty. Like, it's a mean, bad person with you can't like them.
Yeah, so that's a good point about how the celebrity stuff was a real downturn.
It just really takes you out of it and makes it feel like it makes it feel like any other dumb network sitcom to a certain degree.
This point in the show, we are one episode removed from Michael's goodbye that I wanted to cover, but it's two parts. They have one episode where D'Angelo takes over and then ends up trying to do a basketball stunt that I guess Jim tries to make him do, is it?
Mm-hmm.
And he tries to dunk from the free throw line, falls on his head, goes into a coma. And they no longer have a manager in this episode. No one is filling in that role at all. So the office is running autonomously. After this episode, they have a two-parter where they form a committee to find whoever that's going to be, and then the season ends, and it goes into season 8 after this. The other thing, too, about this episode, by the way, that I'll mention is, so it wasn't highly rated. People didn't watch it. I don't know if they were already kind of turned off by the Michael Scott thing. It was the second lowest rated of the second lowest watched episode of the season, behind some episode called Todd Packer, which I guess explores more about that guy's character.
That one. Yeah.
So this is only more watched than that episode of the season, but critically it was reviewed okay, and Rotten Tomatoes said that this is proof that, see what you guys think, this is proof that the show still has potential to succeed even without Michael. Because again, this is right after that.
I don't think I buy that. There are moments.
Yeah, I will be honest. I watched these as they were airing when it was happening, and my view on them was very sour in retrospect in the intervening 10 or 12 years. And I had a really good time watching this, and I think there's a lot redeeming about it, but none of it is really from a story perspective. Like,
it's a Dwight-centric episode, and Dwight's weird. That's what happened.
The show's still funny. I still like the characters and the actors, and it's fun to see them in episodes that I've only seen one time. But even seeing Dwight be manager should be fun. We've already seen it.
Yeah, that's true. This is nothing new.
Yeah, nothing here. Everything that's happening here. And 900 people have already been manager, even when Michael was there. Like, by now, everything feels like it's run its course.
It's almost like a chance for them to do it all one last time or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
It definitely didn't feel like anything new, which is why I had the episodes before and after this one picked. Not this one, but we wanted to get something around the time Michael left so we can discuss how it ushers in those last couple seasons. But that pretty much sets us up where we are in the course of the show and where we came from with what you guys did. So let's just jump into Dwight K. Schrute, acting manager. The episode starts with a small assembly in a meeting room with Pam taking notes, and it's Jim, Dwight, Oscar, Angela, and Phyllis. They're all weighing in on what to leave D'Angelo, who's just had his accident, as a gift while he lies comatose in the hospital. Jim's got the vote for the standard thing. Let's leave a basket full of chocolates, teddy bears, and balloons. Everyone is in favor of that except for Dwight, who wants to leave a knapsack full of canned goods, chainsaw, and an emergency radio. And that's in case he wakes up post-apocalypse.
Which Dwight is also a survivalist. That's one of his things.
From the very beginning.
I was able to chuckle at this, but this is already Flanderized Dwight.
He's already gone too far.
And so it's like we've already seen this. I mean, the words were different, but we've already seen a Dwight doesn't perform like normal people do. But it's still worthy of a chuckle.
It's almost like one of those things where he's like a little too far, including the chainsaw.
Right, yeah.
If you just say the other stuff, yeah, like just canned goods or whatever, there's still a believability that some goofball like this would say that.
Well, and there's one episode where he's eating his expired or about to expire canned goods, so that fits with the character.
Yeah.
And to the camera, Jim remarks, this is him updating us on how things have been since D'Angelo has not been around, which is that actually everything is going really well without a manager, and they're doing as good of a job as they've ever done, and everyone's really seen, like, all the employees seem at peace and happy with their jobs, and they've been productive. They kind of pan around the office and we see everyone doing their job quietly and looking at home, even Stanley. So when Jim gets a call from Joe offering him the chance to fill in as an interim manager, he declines without a second thought.
That was Joe asking me if I wanted to take over as acting manager while they find a replacement. But I told her, I don't want to mess this up, right? There's a consensus. People are happy. Dwight Schrute. Yes, I would.
And credits.
Good line read.
Yeah.
Good line read.
It's perfectly set up there, and I didn't include it in that clip, but Pam made me laugh really hard with a long pause between her and Jim looking at each other, and she goes, "What have you done?" in this really panicked voice that's just perfect for that.
Well, Katie and I watched this one together before I wrote my notes. What do you guys think about the idea of Jim turning down the promotion? We've already seen him be manager for a bit before Saber took over, so he had that aspiration. Now he doesn't?
I think in truth, it's just an inconsistency to drive plot. But also, Jim never knows what he wants.
True.
He never once comes across as managerial. Like,
No.
everybody thinks he's capable, which he is, but not of managing anyone.
Mhm.
No,
he's not
just-
a conflict
He's
guy.
too laid back. Yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't fit. I thought it made sense, but I don't have the full framework that you guys have. I thought him saying like, "We're doing fine. Let's not do anything that messes this up," is how I took that.
I think my big argument is that when Saber bought the company, Michael and Jim were co-managers. Then Saber buys it, and Jim and Michael both find out that the salesman can make so much more money by doing well.
Which
Jim's
is
a good
very
salesman.
realistic.
Yep.
So Jim's happy being a salesman. He makes more money. So I think that's kind of what it is.
That's true. That
it's
had
mostly
happened.
plot, though, but I think that's it.
Yeah. I forgot that whole thing had happened by now.
There's a plot of a whole episode because
Mhm.
Michael lets Jim be boss so he can be salesman, but then he finds Phyllis to be stinky.
I think Timothy Oliphant is there, maybe.
I like him. He's a handsome
Yeah,
man.
he is. I think that's his whole thing in the show.
Being handsome.
They're just like, that guy's handsome
Mhm.
and works here too, apparently.
Cobb Vanth.
The next scene starts with Jim and Pam pulling up to the office in the morning for work. Jim doesn't want to get out of the car because it's obvious that the way things have been going around the office is really bad already. And to the camera, he mentions, Dwight's been acting manager for 3 months. And then we find out it's really just been a week, but it's feeling like 3 months to Jim because it's been so awful already. So he goes over a little bit of the changes Dwight's already implemented, which is punching into a time clock that is very old and very strong.
Okay, I like this joke. He
It's
puts a pencil in
fantastic.
it and it shatters the fucking pencil.
Yeah,
I
it has
laughed
the-
out loud at the visual of that.
It has the slot about the size of a finger, he says. I like how he describes the time clock as strong.
Yes.
And it is this antique piece of equipment that no one would, like maybe in the Industrial Revolution they would have used. There's also large new business cards that stand out from the competition and don't fit in anything that they have. And everyone's title is junior employee on it. That's all Dwight's doing. And now staggered lunch breaks to prevent the waste of time. Jim's lunch is at 10:30.
Oh, God. I had
Because-
this happen at
I've had this
Expedia
too.
when I worked there. And I had a lunch break at 10:30. I'm a night person, but I was doing like a normal shift. I worked for an hour, had a lunch, and
Which
then
is-
worked 7 hours. That's
Which is
awful.
exactly what that's the exact line, that thing where he says, I find the first hour goes much faster than the second 7.
It's terrible.
It's unbearable because you just like it divides your day up so wrong. I want to push it all back as far as I can. So the back half of the day is nothing.
So you like a 7-hour day and then a 1 hour.
Yeah, I will just crush myself for the first several hours.
Which is I don't think any better. I like to have it right in the middle, so it's like, okay, now the first half is done. Let's tackle the second half. I don't want to suffer
definitely
either side.
the individual psychology.
Yeah.
One time when I was working at Expedia, I was so depressed because I hated the work so much that I was prescribed Klonopin, and I was popping them like crazy. And I took one because I was having a bad day, and then I slept an hour through my lunch break because Hotels.com, Expedia, had bought the old airport that we had, so there were just vacant rooms everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
So I just went and fell asleep in a room. And then I was like, sorry, boss, I missed an hour because I fell asleep.
I was testing the product.
I've done that at a job I won't name, and certainly isn't the current one at all. But I clocked out for lunch one time when I first started, took a nap, and woke up an hour and a half later for a 30-minute lunch. No one ever knew, so it's fine. The workday begins. We see the employees are now gathering in the main area to recite the Pledge of Allegiance, which is led by Dwight. I noticed Kevin was very into it, by the way.
Yeah, this is another. Actually, all this stuff, the details up front of what Dwight's been doing, I like. It's pretty. The fact that he
so
would treat
far,
it like
it's all
school
good, yeah.
makes all the sense in the world.
And Oscar was not reciting it
At
until
all.
he saw the camera on it,
Yeah.
and then he did it.
Very good detail.
Yeah.
So Dwight goes into the morning announcements, which is just a few quick things. Do not share your 21-digit copier code to anyone. Joe's coming in later in the day. That's the CEO of Sabre for the high-level meeting, which Erin prods until he admits it's just a meet and greet with he and Gabe and Joe. Dwight warns everyone, look, Joe's coming, so I need you all to be on your best behavior. I don't want anyone to foment insurrection. And that's where Jim's like, well, I already was, so can I be grandfathered in? And then Dwight says, well, that depends. Define foment. Jim says, why don't you define it, Dwight? And Dwight can't because he's just using the word he doesn't know what it means.
It's a good word.
I like it. I don't use it very often.
We should.
Maybe ever.
Foment revolution on this podcast.
In the next scene, we have our B plot of the episode, which is Erin and Andy laughing together at the workstation, and our newish, or at least to me new, cast member Gabe, who we talked about up at the top, is upset, very upset at the sight of them enjoying each other's company, and pulls Andy roughly into the conference room, draws the blinds, and then begins to cry pretty much immediately.
Is Gabe what people see when they look at me?
I don't think so.
Gabe?
I don't think so.
Now, he has those piercing blue eyes that you'll get lost in.
He knows how to make his face look impossibly sad.
Yeah.
Like just in passing.
But he's so much bigger than everyone else in this office, and everyone's a little weirded out by him, which is a couple of traits I have.
No, he leads way too emotionally. I wouldn't say you're in danger of hitting that
True.
personality.
No, if anything, they'd be like, hey, you should cry more often.
Oh, I do enough of that.
So he demands Andy not try to date Erin again so that he can win her back himself.
Normal stuff.
and to be fair, Andy agrees with you, Brian, because he's disturbed enough by this spectacle to, I mean, kind of agree.
Andy, do you like being alone with me right now?
No, this is horrifying.
No, I don't like being alone with me either. Okay, I have to get Erin back. Are you still gonna date her?
We're just friends, okay?
Do you promise that?
Yeah, fine, I promise. We'll never date again. Can we go outside now?
No, just give me a second.
This is, again, when I mentioned, like, I'm more fond of Andy than I remembered, and you have the future Andy in mind when you said I can't agree with that, but that's a really good Andy moment right
It's
there.
awesome. He does a good job. Gabe does a fantastic job
Absolutely.
being fucking terrifying.
One of my favorite things about seeing this episode after having not seen these late ones in a long time is seeing how easily Gabe makes Andy look normal.
That's true.
And very little else to... In that other episode with that, hey, Tuna, you see what a douche he normally is.
One of my favorite Gabe lines is when Erin and he are dating. I think it's an Erin talking head segment. And she says that sex with Gabe is like being tackled by a skeleton.
I was not sure why they have that. We'll get into that later. I didn't get it. I don't know if that's Erin or if it's Gabe or what, but I will ask you guys about that.
Erin
when we get
has
to it.
an incredible line about him later.
Yeah, and I didn't understand. I wasn't okay. We'll get into that because I was wondering. And so next we see Jim penning a flyer for the Fist on the bulletin board. It says join the Fist.
This stuff was good too. This reminded me of an earlier thing.
It
It's a
really
good Jim Dwight
is.
conflict.
Yeah.
And it's so quick and not really needed, but it
Yeah.
does that little thing where it's all Jim and Dwight playing off each other like the old days. And Jim is clearly trying to catch Dwight's attention with this, and it works. Dwight demands to know what is the Fist. Jim shrugs it off and says, it's just a social club like the French Revolution or the Black Panthers or communism. You know, it's a social club. And Dwight says, well, I'd like to join and see what's going on here. And Jim says, well, we'd love to have you, but not today. You know, today's not a good day with Operation Overthrow going on and all that. Dwight rips the flyer down, storms off to the bathroom. Jim knew this would happen, so he returns with 2 more to put up in its place.
Is it here that Daryl walks by
And does the
They
fist.
do the
and
little...
both he and Jim do the fist in front of Dwight? That's so good.
I got a sense that Daryl didn't even know what he was doing, but is like, whatever, sure.
I
I'll
wonder
fist
that
back
exact same
at you.
thing, if that was
I think Jim and Daryl are pretty close. I think Jim was like, hey, do this.
it. Very well could. Either way, it's sort of the same thing.
Yeah.
Like they kind of know.
It just looked like Dwight... It looked to me like Daryl was like, I don't know what you're doing, but I get the sense of it. Sure, yeah, let's do the fist and confuse Dwight. So we see how Dwight's policies are affecting the office right away after the scene here, which is a line is formed at the copier as Kevin tries to enter his 21-digit code very slowly, like Kevin would do. Angela seems especially annoyed behind him. And then on a separate part, Stanley is grabbing a cup of coffee at Dwight's caffeine corner that we later learned is the name of this. It has a camera directly focused on the coffee with a honor sign, 50-cent sign right above it. Stanley fills his cup, smirks, and walks away without paying. Meanwhile, Andy tries to show Pam a hilarious video of Beyonce falling with a fart mixed in.
It was pretty funny.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
She farts, but she's Beyonce.
That reminded me, because this was 2011, internet culture is the same. Basically.
It had arrived by this point.
Yeah.
A meme.
So they can't go to this site and watch this hilarious video because that site is blocked by a freshly installed firewall that Dwight's got in
Oh,
place.
Michael would hate that so much.
To the camera, Dwight is looming behind his desk in his newly decorated office and just gloating. He's so happy with the things he has done here and I guess kind of what he's become and the role he's stepped into. He says, I'll never be happier than I am right now in this role as acting manager. And I'll never be less happy. I've reached my maximum happiness. So we see some of the changes he's made to the office, which is a gun, which
It's a Beaumont Adams, Spencer.
that's actually Chekhov's gun. It's Chekhov's
It's a
gun's
gun.
gun
Yeah.
in this case. It's not a Chekhov something else.
And it does fire.
Mhm.
And currently it's just in the display case. But yeah, it's a replica to impress Joe, which we learn later.
Joe's like a rootin' tootin' Southern lady, and so Dwight's trying to play up to her enjoyment with the gun and with the piranha that's behind
He's
him.
got a piranha swimming menacingly in an aquarium behind him.
He
And-
says it's a rescue.
Yeah.
And the desk itself is like a lavish marble slab. And I guess later we figure out that was another kind of replica that he ordered. So he's just,
Yeah, it's a replica of Uday Hussein's desk.
he's gone all in on these office changes, which by the way, there's more. Kevin is particularly aghast at a development with the vending machines because it's just been empty. There's no snacks. It just says, hey, go to Dwight's caffeine corner for coffee. And it's just science and that's it.
Does Dwight own the building by now?
Not yet. No, that
Okay.
comes a little bit later because Joe. Oh, maybe it does.
I wondered that with the vending stuff in the caffeine corner, if he has just free run of this whole thing already.
It could be because basically Dwight's trying to buy something and Joe says, you need to put that money in real. Oh, Joe says, like, you turn that money into new money? And Dwight goes, are you talking about alchemy?
I forgot about that.
And then she says, no, you got to put real estate. And then he buys the office. But I feel like Nate was already there for
Yeah,
that.
I don't think that's happened yet. I think
Hmm.
that's maybe the next season. I do like the character thing about Dwight where he sort of just has a ton of stuff and doesn't completely understand it.
Mhm.
Like, oh, I have all this acreage and this beet farm and like, oh, now I own this. And because he's Dwight, he doesn't ever live any more extravagantly or anything.
But we do see scenes at Schrute Farms where it's this rustic place.
Yeah.
And then he'll have like a 70-inch television mounted to the wall. So he understands a little of the creature comforts, but is still like a goofy hillbilly stuck in the past.
Another really terrific Andy moment is when he is visiting Schrute Farms as a potential place to marry Angela, and he is constantly stepping in animal shit
In
even
the kitchen.
in the house. Yeah.
There is a Creed throwaway line that I almost skipped if I didn't know it was you guys. But a little moment here where after they're talking about the vending machine not having thing, Creed says, well, you guys, there's snacks in the freezer. He left snacks in the freezer for us. Pam's horrified because she's like, are you talking about the mice for the piranha? And then Creed says, no, the blueberry Slurpee pouch. So Phyllis is actually the one to translate this and says, he means the ice pack.
This is pretty great. The idea that he thinks it's a snack, there's one of them, and it's huge.
And it's poison.
Yeah.
That stuff is filled with a chemical that will freeze.
So meanwhile, Erin's just trying to do her normal job. And now is when Gabe decides, I am going to tell her that I still have feelings for her. So he goes into a long list of things that he doesn't believe in, many of which he immediately walks back because Erin's face gets sad when he says it. So
She's
he's like,
a toddler. She has
Yes.
no competency.
Ellie Kemper does do well at that whole like, oh, I'm so sad you just said that and disappointing me. So he's like, I don't believe in God. Well, you know, maybe just not that kind of God. And this goes on for a little while.
When her face falls when he says, just not God, not an old man with a long white beard.
And then he goes, okay, maybe, but
The idea that Erin specifically has to
Wants
believe
it to be that kind of God.
Yeah.
that's Erin.
He just keeps backing off from what he doesn't believe in. But his ultimate point is, look, I question a lot of things. The thing I don't question, us, love. We belong together, Erin. To the camera, Erin says she's not really interested in dating at the moment at all. Gabe was a great guy, but she just found it difficult being touched by him. This is the moment that I was wondering about and that you guys were talking about earlier. Is this an Erin thing or just she doesn't like Gabe?
Yeah, she is grossed out by Gabe.
She basically believes she's doing it right, but doesn't like it and doesn't understand why she doesn't like it.
Yeah, she wants to.
Yeah.
She's like, Gabe's nice. Why don't, because she can't put two and two together. They're like, why am I just repulsed by this person?
Was it suggested that she had anything like that with Andy? Like because
No.
they appear to have chemistry in this
Yeah.
episode. So, okay. I just wasn't sure if Erin was supposed to be like maybe not a physical person.
Yeah, no,
Or-
Andy and Erin were happy and it was going well until it didn't, which was also they did that poorly.
Yeah, they did.
But then also it gets way worse for those two
If
characters.
they had picked their moments on these romances, it's just like, oh, everyone liked the Jim and Pam one. Oh, let's do them with all of them. And Michael Hawley works too. So does Michael and Jan because of what it is.
But Erin and Andy doesn't because
No.
he's like 20 years older than her. It's gross. And he's smarter than she is.
Right. A lot of this, even though but his immaturity is the part that latches onto her.
Yeah.
Which is, I guess.
That does fit.
But it's a string of like, it would have been nice to, it's kind of why the Gabe thing, Gabe's at least closer to her age.
Mhm.
And it'd be nice to have more of that. Like, there is even a little too much of the, well, no, it makes sense for Michael. I was going to say Michael thinks every young woman who shows up might be a potential interest for him, but of course he thinks that.
So we get another Jim and Dwight moment next, and it's really textbook. It's kind of like all their moments in this particular episode that they were focusing on, which is Jim remarking, hey, you've really done a good job turning the office into a Bond villain lair. Dwight says, hey, the gun Joan owns it. It's a replica. We talked about that earlier. And the piranha, like Brian said, it's a rescue. And Dwight asks Jim, look, you made me look stupid earlier when that word I couldn't say. You can't do that when Joe gets here. You need to be on your best behavior. Jim says, well, there's a problem with that. I promised other people I would be on my worst, and I gave him my word, so I can't do that. Again, this is very Dwight and Jim, this whole thing. And then it's turning into Dwight threatening because that's what he does with his authority, which is, if you don't do this, I'm going to pre-fire you. And when I get the job, it'll be a full fire. Jim says, you wouldn't, and decides by the time you get the job, if you get it, you'll be in love with me. Just a little back and forth to frazzle Dwight.
It's cute.
Yeah, it's cute, and the really quick Dwight reaction to the "you'll be in love with me." What? It's like almost like he believes it's possible, which is
And is uncomfortable with it.
Which is one of the underpinnings of Jim and Dwight is they have a deep affection for one another.
And that is one thing that does go well in the final season. There's
Yeah.
one episode where Jim's doing his own thing and Dwight's sad because Jim's not there giving him shit
Mhm.
in the office. And it's just cute the way that played out.
They do really well with it, and this episode gets it at the end where, despite all the trouble Jim does give Dwight, he usually gets a line where it's like, you're not all bad, basically. And it happens here in that perfect textbook form, but that's almost constantly there, so you know that despite Jim being fascinated by Dwight and enjoys making fun of him and is truly just not sure like how Dwight is a person, he doesn't hate him. It's not, some of the stuff Jim does could be malicious, but the Dwight stuff is typically not.
Another big key episode for that is a really good episode is the bed and breakfast one where Jim and Pam stay out there and Dwight's upset about Angela still.
And they leave a good Yelp review.
They leave a good review because that's like, he opens up with that whole thing of like, it's the lifeblood of my business.
My favorite part of that is Dwight is moaning while Jim and Pam are trying to sleep at Schrute Farms, and Jim checks in with him, and I don't remember how they get there, but Dwight says something like, oh, it's probably just Mose. He hasn't been the same since the storm.
It's so good. I also like how all the rooms are themed. I believe they pick agriculture, irrigation. That's what it is.
The best Jim comforting Dwight moment, though, and it's heart-wrenching, is when Angela does break up with him, he's sobbing in the stairwell.
Yes, that
and
is
Jim
the best
sits down next to him and tells him, when Pam turned me down, I was lost, da-da-da-da. And then he gets up to leave, and Dwight reaches over to put an arm around him, and he's already gone. But it's still a very good moment.
Yeah, he ends it saying, like, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. And Dwight's being hesitant when he finally decides Jim's gone, which also makes it perfect. Like, they don't consummate it fully.
The next scene here is another thing we touched on, where Dwight has the meeting with Jordan and acknowledges what Van said, which
he's like, man, you were the best for the Bulls. You won all those championship rings. Is Michael Jordan. That's the only one I can think of.
And you did okay in that Wizards here.
So he tells Jordan, look, everyone thinks you're a joke. They think you were hired for your looks, and I'm going to be honest with you.
She was.
Based on your skin tone and your bone structure, that's not going to last very long. You're going to be horrible real soon. You're going to age prematurely.
You hideous goblin.
And Jordan's like, why are you telling me all this? And he's like, because that's what people are saying about you. I need you to return the favor now that I've earned your trust and tell me what people are saying about me.
Dwight, still oblivious as to what people might be saying after all these years about him, which is part of the thing I love about Dwight, just like how he believes the gym pranks are real.
And all the while, as he's talking to her, he's cutting open a box with some kind of dagger.
It's like a sai, like Raphael would
Yeah,
have.
it's super fancy, and it doesn't get mentioned, but that's a part of the scene nonetheless.
Seems like it was forged in fire.
He immediately drops the knife and stops talking to Jordan because he's what's in this box has made him happier than really anything except for the promotion to acting manager, which is a holster from his great uncle Honk, as we later learn.
Honk.
Yeah, laughed out loud at that. Didn't remember that at all.
So there's only a brief transition from the Jordan scene, and Dwight is now strutting around the office wearing this holster, and because he's got the holster on, he decided to go ahead and get the gun out of the display case and wear it.
Okay, real quick, I'd like to say, up until now, it basically feels like any Office episode. I mean, maybe it's not as strong as some of the best ones, but here on out is where we really get the
wacky.
Yeah, some of the what's going on in the office. Like you can't keep the story small enough anymore. Everything has to be a little too much.
Loud and big.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Have either of you worked in an office setting where someone wandered around with a gun?
Probably. I mean, I didn't know it, but
the closest I came was the story I told you guys, not on the podcast, but where I would watch over at a retirement home until the security guard came in overnight that the company we contracted for, and they were allowed to carry. They didn't have to, certainly for our facility, but they were allowed to. He was so proud of his weapon that he had me hold it loaded.
Ugh.
And I hadn't even clocked out from my job yet. That was the closest I came, and that was awful. I felt so uncomfortable.
Well, I worked for a man named Robert L. O'Block, who was loaded at any given moment. He thought he fancied himself a cop. So he had 3 guns on him. He had one on the ankle, one on the hip and the holster, and then one on like those cop shoulder things where you wear suspenders under your jacket. And he was a lunatic and a racist, and he ended up killing himself as well as another poor girl. And it's a wild story.
By the way, I bet listeners, I bet when Van started talking, you didn't think it would end that way, did you?
Probably not.
Well, you can Google it. It's fucking horrifying.
And someday I'll do a podcast or I'll write a book or something about it because the whole thing is wild and I still have all my papers from it. And oh, man. But yeah, no, he walked around with a gun all the time.
There's another guy who worked with a gun, but it wasn't an office, and we've all worked with him. It was at a bowling alley.
So Pam is the first to ask Dwight what exactly he's doing. And is that a gun? Andy immediately says, hey, I'm not really comfortable with that. And Dwight says, it's just an accessory for the holster, guys. I don't really care about the gun part, which is true. It just doesn't really matter considering he is wearing the gun. Pam demands he put it away, and Dwight does acquiesce, but he carelessly wrenches it from the holster and twirls it around his finger in the process of being like, fine, I'll get the banana like Kevin told me to. And the gun goes off right next to Andy's ear. It's at this moment, having heard the gunshot, we get Toby, who we haven't seen yet in this one. He barges in, demands to know what is going on in here. Andy says he's got a severe ringing in his ear and wants to go to the hospital. Erin volunteers. And Gabe says, nope, we don't want to be without a receptionist now more than ever, which was a pretty good line. Daryl, who we haven't seen so far and is a welcome sight, bravely volunteers to take Andy. And I like this touch. Like Andy seems pleased that it's Daryl that's going to take him. And is like, oh, Daryl, and latches onto him really awkwardly.
They have a little bit of a relationship.
They play music together.
Buds. Yeah, that's right. They're in the band with Kevin.
It looks like it might be more on Andy's side, the fondness in this scene.
Yeah.
Because
I'm sure it more is.
He kind of latches onto him, and Daryl's kind of like, what's wrong with you?
Well, because he
Isn't
limps.
it just your ear? Yeah, because Andy's acting like he needs to be carried away practically.
Here's the problem with that. That's the second time they've done that joke. I'm trying to remember the first time. Anyway, a different character at one point had something happen that hurt their head or whatever, or their shoulder, and he limps. And Daryl, I think, is even the one that says, are you limping? It's lazy when it's done that
It's kind
much.
of how it feels this far, and I doubt even, like,
they remember.
150 episodes, yeah. I don't remember what I've said on this podcast.
So with Daryl and Andy gone, Toby decides to take on the investigation and figure out what's going on here. And he's actually a little excited because he's never gotten to use the gun violence forms before.
He's an HR guy.
Mm-hmm.
And this frustrates Dwight, who says, everyone in the conference room right now, we're going to solve this. So everyone's seated in there. Dwight enters last, wearing a cowboy hat, and it looks like he's going to go into like a skit.
A total Michael.
Yes, he's taking on a role, and he's going to be gun safety Dwight.
He says rootin' tootin'.
Yeah, it's a little bit. He drops the act really fast, though, and says, I can't do this, and then proceeds to gaslight the group into saying, like, I didn't do it, right? Nobody actually saw me fire the gun. When Toby asks for eyewitness accounts, pretty much everyone raises their hand because they did see him do it. Dwight tries an attempt to reason with the group.
Managing you for this last week has been the greatest honor of my life. And if you ruin this, I will burn this office to the ground. And I mean that figuratively, not literally, because you guys are so important to me. I love you guys, but don't cross me, but you're the best.
So Dwight's awkwardness of like, hey, I love you guys, but, you know, I will threaten you if you don't do what I want. He kind of never does get away from that. His character being flaunting the authority, and then in this case also trying to butter them up at the same time. A little bit awkward. Daryl and Andy return. Andy burst his eardrum, as we find out, and Dwight tries to suggest, is that because you use Q-tips in your ears? And Andy doesn't really respond to that and does say he has temporary deafness in one ear, but that's better than what he had before because he thought he had temporary deafness in both ears. He says when he's at the hospital, he couldn't hear a thing. And then we pan to Daryl, who has a to the camera moment where he says, okay, I'm not proud of this, but I was just mouthing the words to Andy at the hospital. He kept calling himself a gunshot victim, and it kind of pissed me off.
Which is a great contrast between the first episode we covered with the, quote, black phrases and this. Like, Daryl just can't help himself, so he just goes to town.
He's got these people who are too just clueless about everything.
Mm-hmm.
The two, and I guess we only got the two Craig Robinson scenes in this, in your episode, Brian, where he's not wanting them to use the warehouse, and in this, I loved them both very much.
And his little fist moment, which is unspoken and still great.
Mm-hmm.
He's really good in these.
Yeah, pretty much all the Daryl moments is the ones that I remember in the earlier are all amazing. On all the episodes, they kind of focus more on Daryl. They're typically really funny and well handled.
He was also great in D-War, Dragon Wars.
I don't know what that is.
A real movie that
I didn't know that.
Whatever name is in. Not Robinson.
That's right.
Is that right?
Craig Robinson.
He was in that.
Doesn't he do commercials? Like
a lot of them.
Pizza Hut.
Okay.
He's always like, Pizza the Hut, and then eats a pizza.
Pretty good job.
You know who else is in that D-War - Dragon Wars movie?
No one?
Robert Forster.
Oh, he's great. R.I.P.
Not so much in that movie, but yes.
I don't believe that's real at all.
It was a Korean-made movie, and it's horrible. Big budget. Craig Robinson.
So sensing they've got him backed into a corner, the employees began asking favors from Dwight, knowing that they can pretty much get whatever they want since he needs them to lie for him. The suggestion being that they might talk to Joe later if he doesn't do exactly what they say. We get Kelly wants to take off work to go do an American Idol audition. Phyllis just wants an extra vacation day because she's kind of boring. Kevin wants the fruit removed from the vending machines. And when Dwight says, I already put the snacks back in, and Kevin says, no, I want you to take the fruit out of the vending machines.
And he's very forceful with it.
Very. Pam wants just no more weapons or murderous fish. He's got to get rid of all that stuff.
Which I buy the weapon, but it's a fish. What's the fish?
Yeah, I don't see the problem with
I
the
think
piranha.
if she would have known what was going to happen, she would take that back.
True.
So Dwight looks to Jim last, like, okay, what pile on? What are you going to say? And Jim says, no, I think I'm good. I'm not going to do anything here. And Dwight says, thank God. And Jim says, well, can you work Shagadelic Baby at least 3 times when you're talking to Joe? And tell you what, when I cough, can you do jazz hands for me?
I was really hoping there'd be more use of Shagadelic Baby. Although when it comes back, I like
it's
how
a soft ending for that. It's a nice little touch.
This is not Goldmember, Brian.
Goldmember, a movie we saw together as children.
At the drive-in, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Joe finally arrives, and I don't know if I saw too much Kathy Bates before I stopped watching, but I got what I think might be my first glimpse of her.
She's great. Kathy Bates is awesome.
Yeah, and especially in Limited, because she's going so, like, Southern dandy with it.
Yeah, it's a character.
Yeah.
And she plays it hard, and it works in small doses.
You can tell Dwight is nervous around her for several reasons, but also the main thing being the gun issue that just happened.
She broke that guy's legs. Her favorite author.
Oh, yeah.
She wanted to finish the book. And
James Caan
is bad.
He just recently finally died from it.
Speaking of movies that are difficult to watch,
He did die, right?
He did. I watched Misery again this past summer. It's really good.
Is it? I'd like to see it again.
And the book is very good,
Is that a King book?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I've actually, that might be one of the Stephen King ones I've read twice, and it's just, it's so tough. Like, she's terrible and really fucked up and violent, really violent. Just, it's actually one of I think Stephen King at his best in that one, or close to.
You know, another thing about that book and movie that's oddly predictive. When was that book written? In the 80s?
Must have been.
It is weirdly predictive about like the fan culture stuff of like, I want it to end how I say, and the characters, this sense of ownership that you don't have.
Mm-hmm.
In the greeting of Joe, Jim assures her that Dwight is firing on all cylinders and gives Dwight a meaningful look that makes him very nervous. At this point, Gabe walks in on Andy and Erin laughing in the kitchen in a separate room, confronts them because that's them talking again. And this is where Andy is forced to reveal you promised you would never date her again and that you wouldn't want to date her again.
Except he goes, hey, Andy, did you tell Erin about our conversation earlier about how you'd never date her and we're going to see her again?
Zach Woods kind of plays Gabe in a way that Melora Hardin plays Jan, in a way that it's just too... like watching it even is really tough. Something feels just too off.
Mm-hmm.
Andy says, well, you were crying when you made me say that. So that decision was kind of coerced. And honestly, I don't know that I feel that way. And when Gabe pushes him, like, is that what you feel? He says, yes or no. That's between me and my diary, and then leaves the room. And then Erin, who is just kind of off put by the whole thing, leaves as well. And that's the resolution of the B plot for this episode, is they're all kind of upset at each other, and Erin clearly doesn't have any interest in Gabe.
It's the old love triangle where we don't want to see any of them together.
There's one final employee blackmail scheme that we haven't gotten to cover yet, which is Kevin deciding to get on a beyond the vending machine request by requesting an aggressive back massage.
This scene sucks.
It's gross to look at, too.
It's the physical comedy thing for Rainn Wilson, too, as he gets to put his feet in the cabinet and make fun of Kevin being fat and sweaty and press into his back.
And he does a lot of physical comedy that I think works. This goes on a long time.
It is. It's a long scene. I think it was expected that Kevin's kind of demand for a back massage would really hit with audiences.
Yeah.
Like, that's hilarious.
We've been waiting 7 years for this.
So it's at this point in the middle of the back robe that Joe returns and asks to be walked out. Dwight's conscience finally just catches up to him here, and he just realizes that he doesn't want to live this lie, and it's just not going to work with being the best manager he can be. So he just admits to Joe, look, I accidentally fired a gun off in the office earlier. The job is just too important. I've got to tell you that, and I can't be extorted by my coworkers. I want to do the best job I can, and besides, extortion is way worse than shooting a gun in the office. And Joe says, no, actually shooting a gun is way worse. It's not even close. You can't stay in this position, Dwight. You're not the right person for it.
And this is another one. I know the show, even early, wasn't strictly realistic, but you don't have a job and you have a legal problem.
My problem with this is that there's a bullet hole in the floor. This is a loaded gun. He needs to be in trouble for this.
And again, I know it's a sitcom, but this show wouldn't have done that earlier.
They should have just had it be without a bullet in there, and it's still going to have the same effect to Andy. It's going to go off or whatever, and it's going to hurt his ear. That would have been far more believable with just a tiny change. But the fact that Oscar sees a bullet hole in the floor and gets mad that there's wonderful wood underneath the carpeting, I don't like that he fired a real gun. It's too much.
It's just too much.
So we know Dwight's just kind of, like Brian said, he's gently demoted from his position and he's not going to be the manager anymore. This is where we learn what these next two episodes are going to be before the season ends, where Joe has formed a little committee of it's Jim, Toby, and Gabe. And she says, hey, you guys are going to work together to find who our next manager is going to be. In the meantime, who's our most senior employee? We'll just have them fill in for a little bit. And then Toby, the camera zoom, actually they all look terrified, but Toby speaks for them all and says, oh, I don't think we should go off tenure. That doesn't seem like a good idea. And Joe says, well, who is it? We don't get the answer right away, but we do know that the employees think it's a bad idea. As Dwight returns his items to his old desk because he's no longer acting manager, Jim gives him a little tough love. It's another quintessential Jim and Dwight moment. He says, honestly, Joe had to do what she did. You know that, right? There was no question that what you did warranted being let go from that position and that it was the right thing. I will say, though, when you were acting manager, we got every order out in that week on time. And I think that's pretty shagadelic, baby.
I mean, hey, Mussolini made the trains run on time, right?
It has that little gleam in Dwight's eye, though, where he doesn't say anything, but you can tell that he's like, that means everything to me, that Jim pointed out that even though I was awful, we did our job and we got it done.
I like that it's a compliment you can pay that's just a fact too, because like that's it. Dwight would appreciate it, and it's not Jim being like, I like how you ran it. Like sometimes shows will have characters kind of make up in ways that feels like everyone just saying stuff the character doesn't believe. And this is at least just the resuscitation of a fact.
And yet still something Jim knew would lift his spirits a bit from a rough period for him. By the way, in the background all the while, Creed is in the manager's office setting up his stuff.
There's some great jokes with this over the next few episodes of Creed being the boss. One of my favorite ones is he runs a meeting and he's standing there with an easel and he's writing letters down, and he writes down the word bow body, and he goes, we're doing acronyms, because no one's paying attention to him. And I think it's Pam is like, what are you doing? We're doing acronyms. What does the B stand for? And Kevin's into it, and he goes, business. He goes, I like it. And then he misspells business. He writes it B-I-Z-N-I-S-S, I think. There's also the meme that floats around of Pam handing Creed a couple of pictures saying, corporate needs you to find the differences between these two pictures. And then later in the talking head segment, she goes, there are no differences. And he's like, okay, I see one. Creed as a manager is great for a few episodes. It's fantastic.
It's a fun little temporary gag, because by then also the sanctity of like the manager being in the plot, something to be like, oh, who's going to get that? Because by this point,
who cares?
Yeah, they've had a million people do it.
And then Creed tries to steal their best clients to make his own paper company.
I want to ask you guys for just a real quick summary of the last two seasons, but I first have to mention there is one very brief post-credit scene where Kevin's again messing with the copier and Angela's yelling at him about it. His name is Kevin Malone, right?
Yeah.
It's a post-credit scene. What does that make this?
Post Malone.
I couldn't help it. Now, tell me about seasons 8 and 9, from what you remember. Cliff notes.
Kevin gets a bunch of face tattoos, first and foremost. No. One of the big things that happens is Andy, of course, becomes manager.
Which you hate.
It's bad. It's very, very bad. They change his character in a couple different ways. They actually make him a true villain a little bit later. They make him evil. He goes on some yacht because his family loses their fortune, and he just sails around. So he's off the show for a while. And in reality, Ed Helms was filming movie or something.
I think it was the third Hangover.
Yeah, makes sense.
He comes back and expects to just get his job back. Eventually, David Wallace, who's out because Dunder Mifflin's folded, and this is Sabre, buys the company back to make it a paper company, which is stupid. No one would do that in 2013.
Yeah, he should have been focusing on that suck it.
Suck it.
Yeah.
You suck it. You suck it.
Having his kid play the drums.
I forgot about that.
Andy gets away with still being manager, even though he hasn't been there and he's been cashing checks for a while. And then David Wallace thanks Andy because Andy gave him the tip to buy the company. It's a bad plot. At the very end of it, Andy goes to audition for American Idol, like Kelly said.
Which I didn't even understand what that meant toward anything. But
It's not funny.
I hated that episode too, because the whole episode is, and I know the joke about Andy is like, oh, nobody likes him playing his banjo and all that. But like the joke is like, Andy, you should know you belong in the office, you silly boy. Like, don't have any dreams.
Let's see. Let's just go through the characters then and what happens to them. Jim and Pam, of course, have kids.
That's the big one, is their ending arc is that Pam thinks Jim's basically like living his own life.
She's mad because she's a homemaker, and Jim is now looking to the horizon. He wants to be a sport man because he's not happy being in the home life anymore.
He and Daryl have a sport company.
And Ryan Howard, the baseball player, not just the little kid from the show, shows up for an episode.
Yeah.
And he tells cool stories because he doesn't want to talk about baseball. He wants to talk about his youth adult book that he wrote.
Which is a pretty funny thing.
Starring a baseball player named Ryan Howard, who by day is a baseball player, by night solves crimes.
But the end result is Pam feels unloved, and she starts talking about it to the cameraman, who becomes a character. The cameraman, that goes nowhere. It only goes for a couple episodes, and then Jim and Pam are just like, I guess it's fine.
And they're okay.
We're okay. And Van said this, Jim and Daryl are successful with their sports company.
And they make a lot of money and quit the office. Angela and Dwight get married. That's the finale. They realize they're going to get back together. Angela, in the interim, has dated a senator.
State senator.
I'm glad you got that. And that didn't work out because the state senator, it turns out, was gay the whole time, who then has a fling with Oscar because Oscar's, of course, gay.
Right.
And he feels bad because Angela loses her house and all her money and all her cats, and It's sad looking at what happens during that final season before Dwight comes back and as a white knight lifts her up. It's terrible.
You said something horrible happened to Erin?
Well, Erin dating Andy again. And Andy then leaves to do his yacht thing. He shows back up like 4 months later and is like, hey, babe, we're still together, right? And she's moved on by this point. And then he is mean to her because she falls in love with one of the new characters who's some, I don't know, pale-faced kid who shows up.
Does she fall in love with the Jim analog?
Yes, not the Dwight.
Because they brought in a Jim and a Dwight with the hopes of just making the show a different show and going for 1,000 more years.
Yeah, glad that didn't work.
The Dwight was the kid from the Hot Tub Time Machine movies. I don't know his name.
Clark Duke, I think, or something like that.
I know his name is Clark in the show.
I think that's right.
So that sounds about right.
And he was in everything around that time, and I haven't seen him
and then disappears.
In years,
Toby falls in love with Nellie, who's this British woman who's awful. And then he befriends the Scranton Strangler, who then strangles him in prison.
Is that real?
He doesn't die, Toby, but he gets hurt.
As you can tell, they're just doing
it's wild.
It's just
wild
absurd.
Stuff.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there probably weren't a whole lot of better episodes than this one the rest of the way, I'm thinking.
I bet this is probably as good as anything that happens after it or better. And I think part of the problem as I'm sitting here thinking about it is like, why did I like when Seinfeld got really wacky at the end? Well, because it was never supposed to be a show, again, that I'm supposed to take emotionally serious. So, like, this show still tries to do that. And it doesn't work when you're having just the wildest stuff happen.
It tries to tug at your heartstrings while also being goofy.
Yeah.
Whereas Seinfeld's like, these people suck, let's be goofy, and they'll still suck.
Yeah, and when The Office was good, it's like these people are goofy in real, believable ways. They're not firing guns and buying companies 3 times a week.
I think we've exhausted our Office journey, and we did a pretty even coverage of the whole thing and got that last end just now. So if you've never seen The Office, which is real likely, you've got a complete overview. If you have seen The Office, then you hopefully got a chance to revisit some of your favorite moments with us, because we did at one point in the show and one point in our lives really enjoy it quite a bit. So it's just something that's nice to come back to every now and then. I'll take some time to throw some website locations and some ways you can support us at you if you are liking what you've heard. First of all, we have a website, bootuinc.com. We write blogs there. Oh, we do GIFs. We make funny little kind of moments of the episodes we've covered. We redo them and we talk about them, and it's just as funny and different there.
Like a visual summary.
Yeah, we like to offer a companion kind of product. You don't just have the audio, you've got the video now too, if you want to do that. We also have actual videos on our YouTube channel, Bootu Inc., which you can find us there. You should, if you have enjoyed this, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast app you use.
What kind of tattoo will we get?
This one?
Oh, like a Beaumont whatever gun.
Beaumont Adams.
It's a girl's gun.
I was going the Joe route. I will get a tattoo of Kathy Bates on my...
That's pretty cool.
That is
on
cool.
my stomach if you guys give us a 5-star review.
I'll let Kathy Bates misery me for one 5-star review.
And please join our Discord. The instructions are on bootuing.com.
I bet they are.
Or so I've been told. We don't really know for sure how to do that, but it's Boob Tube Boys on Discord, and the instructions are on the website. So when you head over there to do the other stuff, do that too.
And just one more thing, I know.
Okay, Columbo.
All the kids out there, you're thinking one thing. I cannot get off my phone because I'm stuck looking at everybody's Goodreads. So go to Goodreads at Loud Guitar Brian. See what I'm reading. Let me see what you're reading. Tell me what YA novel that you're reading and why it's dumb that I read other things.
Probably Michael Crichton that you're reading.
Probably Misery.
YA novels for me were Michael Crichton books for sure.
So before we go, what's everyone's favorite line in The Office?
Somebody make it soup?
When is that?
That's Creed. When somebody shits in Michael's office and he comes in and goes, hey, somebody make it soup.
Oh, man. I feel so on the spot. I have no idea. I'm just going to say another Creed line because it popped right in my head because of that one, which is when no one knows what another smell is coming from his area, and it cuts to Creed, and right away he says, oh, yeah, I know what they're talking about. Mung beans smell like death.
I sprout mung beans on a damp paper towel inside my
great.
desk. Very nutritious, but smells like death.
And it's not my actual favorite line, but I love it.
It's a good one.
My favorite is when the whole group gets herded into the back of a truck and kept there captive, and Rick says, these people are going to find out soon enough. They're screwing with the wrong people. Oh, that's Walking Dead.
What about, forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.